Hello, everyone, and welcome to day 10. So, as okay, hello, everyone, welcome to day 10. I think we're almost halfway through 21 days, and that is good. So, let us quickly look at what the agenda for today is. Today, we will introduce ourselves to functions in programming, to be specific, but almost all programming languages have functions. And so whatever they are, we will get to know very soon. And then we'll also look at parameters and arguments of a function. I think that should do. So we introduce ourselves to functions and then look at how we can, what parameters and arguments are and how we can use them in functions. And so I will define a function as a block of reusable code that performs a specific task. And you will get to understand what I mean by reusable code very soon. And so functions help us in organizing our code and promoting usability, as I said. Uh, Usually, you define a function once, that is the term, define it, and then you can call it anywhere in your code and use it. So that is the usability part I'm talking about, the reusability part, to be specific. And so in Python, let's look at the syntax of a function here. This is the syntax of a function in Python. You start with a def keyword. Sorry, I was trying to get my annotation, screen annotation too. You start with the def keyword, which you can think of as define. And then that one is followed by the function's name, which in our case is greet. And then we also bring this pair of open and closed round brackets. So you have to bring this open and close round brackets and then terminate your idea or the declaration of your function with the colon. So it's just something new, but it shouldn't be difficult to memorize. Just bring up the def keyword, and then you also bring up your function's name, which in our case is greet, and then you bring empty set of round brackets. For now, let's take it like they are always empty, because very soon realize that we can put some things in here and then use them in our functions. When we get there, I will explain. And just like you do for the if and else if statements, you terminate that particular logic with a pair, with a colon. And so let us go ahead and implement just this example that we see here in Python, and then let's see how functions can help us. So I have my PyCharm here opened in advance. So I'll quickly go ahead and type the thing we saw there. So the name was greet, my set of round brackets, and then I terminate the line with the colon. Then I saw here that print, I've forgotten exactly what was there, but it should be something like, welcome to the Python Bootcamp. Should be something like this. I think this one is telling me to reformat my file. It always tries to do that. So this is what we call a function. Okay, the zooming is not that smooth. I wanted to get everything on the screen, but it looks like it's impossible. This is the def keyword. You don't have to customize it. This is how you have to type it. It's a special word in Python. You can't use your own in place of that. And this is the place where you can give it any name that you want. In our case, it's greet because the function is only printing something that looks like a greeting to the run console or the terminal. And then we have to bring our open and close round brackets and then close it with a colon. So what will happen if I run this code? Let me right click as always and then choose run. Okay, I have told you time without number that when you see process finished with exit code 0, then it means our program is done running and it didn't encounter any errors. So that one is done, but we cannot see anything meaningful in our terminal. In fact, we cannot see this print statement here. Usually, when we use the word print, we know that we have to see something in our terminal. But this was not the case because it is now inside this function. And this is where the reusability of the function comes in. You have to now let Python know that you want to use that particular function. Sorry, give me 1 minute. The other side of my screen is not responding. Okay. I think we are cool now. So unless we tell Python that I want to use this particular function, it will not render what is inside it. So if I define another one too, maybe that one, let me call it say hi. And then I just print hi to the terminal like this. Sorry, I forgot to change the banner also. I usually like to hover over this and accept the reformat because I like my code to be standardized, at least according to the PEP8 style. So if I run it again, you will not see anything but the process finished with exit code 0. And that leads us to the next important concept, which is the calling of a function. So we have to call it like it is just like in human terms. If I want to draw your attention, I have to call out your name. So if we call the function any of these two, let's start with greet. And how do we call it? You just type the name of the function as you give it, and then you bring your open and close round brackets. It's necessary. Just have to bring it everywhere you call the function. So now, if you look at PyCharm is intelligently telling me that I have one usage of this function. If I type this greet multiple times, it will update as and when I also use it. But I don't need it 3 times. So now let me run this code when I have called my function and see what will happen. The same line we used to see before, the process finished with exit code 0 is there, but now we also see that welcome to the Python Bootcamp has been printed to the terminal. And so we know that the content of this particular function here has been rendered out. And that only happened because we called the function name. Functions can do more than just printing to the terminal, which the two functions are doing in this case. You can put in any piece of logic. There can be multiple lines. In fact, one function can extend so many lines, but it's usually not recommended as a good practice in programming to put a lot of your logic in one function. You can break them down into other functions because you can actually call a function inside another function. So I will remove the greet calling from here, and then I will call the greet inside the say hi function. So I'll just type greet followed by the set of round brackets. And then when I run it again, because, okay, now I'll have to call the say hi before we see anything on our terminal. So let me call say hi. What the say hi should do is that it should also call greet when it is running before it actually prints its message, which is hi, to our terminal. So we see two things here. One is the logic of the greet function, which we see here. The first line that has been printed. And then the second one is that of the hi function, which is this one, the say hi function. So we have seen that it's called the greet And then whenever the greet is called, we have only told it to print this to the terminal. So it did exactly what we wanted it to do. And then afterwards, it's printed its own value also to the screen. Okay, so let's go ahead and take more complex examples. I told you in the beginning that for now, we only have to pass in some round brackets that we don't use for anything. But let us say that we now want to write the code to compute maybe the sum of two numbers. So we will write the function this way, maybe add. I don't know whether add is a special keyword in Python, so I'll go with add numbers because we can use the special keywords either as variable names, function name, or class names. Like we can use them as our own piece of logic. We just have to choose other stuff. And in here, because I want to take two numbers whenever this function runs, I'll pass in what we call a parameter or parameters in our case, because we want to take more than one number and add it. So we pass in what is called parameters to the function. The parameter is a variable, just like the variables we have been dealing with since day one. So it is any named thing. So I encourage you to use names that are easily readable also in your function parameters, just as you use for ordinary variables. So I can say A, comma B, where I want to add A and B. But you see that it also doesn't really make sense. So I can choose first and second, which also fine. If I say add numbers and then there's first, there's second, I know that I'm actually taking two numbers and then adding them. Or I can actually make it more readable by saying first number and then second number. Okay. Then I come to the next line, and then I can now use this particular parameter inside the function. The scope will be defined inside the function. So let's see how we can do that. I use exactly the name that I passed as the parameter. So I can now call here results and set that result equal to first number plus the second number. And now I have added the two numbers. So I can go ahead. Did I make a typo here? Yes. Okay, it's a first number plus second number. So I can go ahead and now print in another string, preferably, so the sum of the numbers is, and then I can now plug it in here like results. And so when I call this function now, I'll have to give it what we call arguments. What we passed in here. So let me just call it first before I do this explanation. So add numbers, and then let me pass in 20 and then 10, comma separated, just like the function itself. And then PyCharm, not all editors will do this for you, but you see that PyCharm, I did not type this first number here. I just typed 20. This first number you see here, I did not type it. I just typed 20, and then it automatically read from our function here, knowing that the first thing that we pass in the function is the first number. It automatically read it and then try to reformat my code in a way that I will know what is going on, so that it just makes it nice, readable, and you also get to understand, okay, so this thing that I passed is for this number, this is for the other parameter also. But as I said, not all editors do that. I can't confirm for Visual Studio Code, which I believe most of you will be using, or any other editor that can run and edit Python code. There are lots of options there. I can't confirm for all of them, but I know PyCharm does this, and this second number too has been given. Okay, so when I run my code now, I should see that the sum of the numbers is 30. So I can, let me say, change it here, put 40 here. So now I should expect 50 at my terminal, which is exactly so. Okay. Now, to functions, parameters, and arguments is something that kind of throws some confusion in the programming world, and people are trying to come up maybe with their own definitions and all that. But when you say a parameter of a function, the parameter and arguments, the spelling, they are all in the banner beneath the stream, so you can check that out. What you see here that has been passed into the function declaration, this particular block here, we call it the function declaration. So the function has been declared. And then this particular line 11 here is the function calling, or the calling of the function. So we declare the function and then we call it. So what you pass in the round brackets when you declare the function, they are the parameters of the function. So what we see here, no, I don't intend to. Okay, they are the parameters. They are the parameters of the function. And then what we pass in here, they are the arguments. So you can think of the parameters as placeholders and the arguments as actual values. The placeholders are passed to the function during the declaration phase, and the arguments are passed to the function during the calling phase. I just hope that was so easy to understand. So I have a parameter first number, parameters first number and second number, and arguments 40 and 10 being assigned to the first number and second number respectively. Okay, so that is it about function parameters and arguments. In fact, if you get yourself confused with them, you don't really need to differentiate between the two. You just know that if you want to do this with a function, you declare it as a variable here, which is the parameter. And then when you call the function, you can put that one too in. You saw that I just typed 10 and 40. Usually, if you want to also make your code more readable, you can say, first, when you start typing first number, you can actually say first number equal to, say, 50, and then second number equal to maybe 90 or 40, so that you get 90. This time around, it is not PyCharm that suggested it for me. These ones you see here, I wrote them myself. The first number and the second number, I wrote them myself. And so usually you see code that looks like this. It doesn't mean that the editor did it for them. If you don't do it, PyCharm will do it for you. In this case where I did it, PyCharm did not indicate them for me here. Okay, so one advantage with this form of named arguments where I pass the name of the parameter before I give the value is that in case I forget the order of the parameters, I will not be in so much trouble. So I can actually first say that second number is equal to 40, and then now first number equals to 50. This is different from the ordering, which is inside the function declaration. But if I choose to call out the parameters and assign the values, I should be safe. Other than that, if I don't assign or call the parameters in here, like the name of the parameters in here, Python will automatically assume that the first number or the first argument that I pass is for the first parameter, and the second is for the second parameter, and the rest that follows. But if I specifically declare that, okay, even though my parameters are arranged like first number, second number, but I want my second number to be equal to this, and that is what I remember to put first, Python will remember and not mix up those ones that mix up the position or the indexes of the parameters. Let me try and then use the print statement here to explain what I'm saying. So if we go ahead and say print the value of the first parameter, or let me say param, as you mostly see, or let me say parameter, is, and then I can pass that one in. So that will be first number. Okay, then I can duplicate this line, and then the value of the second parameter, that will be second number. Okay, and then now I will not bring the names of the parameters when I am calling them, when I'm calling the function. I'll just pass in 50 and then 40 here. And then I'll run my code. You see that it's just printing them out, assuming that the 50 was for first number and the 40 was for second number. But now let me change this place a bit and specify it myself, starting with the second number. So second number, let that one be now rather equal to 50, or let's maintain the old one to 40. And then first number, let that one be equal to 50, like what we did first. So when we run it, we don't expect these positions to mix. We should still see the 50 first and then the 40 following afterwards. Even though the 40 comes first in the calling. Let's see how that one goes. You see that Python did not mix them up. It did not mix them up. But if I delete these ones from here and then run this code, now it will assume that the second parameter is 50. You see that the order changed also. Okay, so I'm keeping an eye on the comments also. If you have any problems, you can drop it in and I will answer it live. Okay. So that is it also about functions, parameter, and arguments. And I think that is one last thing for us to look at as far as functions is concerned, at least for today. Tomorrow we'll build upon functions and look at advanced function methods and all that. But for today, I think the last item that we should look at before we close the chapter on functions is what we call the functions return statement. Okay, so if you look at what I have done here, fine, it gives us the result like we want it to be. And so there's no problem with it as long as the sum was being printed to the terminal. But for this one, I have to use a mathematical example. I'm sorry if you don't have a background in mathematics, but it shouldn't be difficult to follow. Assuming we want to compute the area of a circle. So that one is given by the value of pi, and then we multiply it by the radius squared. So whatever the value of radius is, so the radius squared. Let's just assume that we will create a function that will square our radius. And so when we get that, then we call that, or we use that value to compute our area by adding or multiplying it with pi. So I'll clear everything out from here, with the exception of what will now be our guide, assuming it's our pseudocode, which is not. So I can now say that because we'll be using pi, I want to now declare it before we even use it. So I can say pi. For now, let's take it to be 3.142 to 3 decimal places. PyCharm I think was trying to suggest it for me. Okay, now it's not bringing the suggestion, but that is okay. So let's also declare the radius of the circle also as a variable. For now, let's take it to be 5 units. So when we square the 5, that should give us 25, but we'll be using a function to do that. So the function's name can be maybe radius squared. And then because we want to square the radius, we can pass in the radius here. In order not to confuse you, maybe you will think that it will automatically take this radius. So let me just make it the radius value, something like that, so that at least you know that the two are not the same. And so here, I can say that the square or squared value, as Python suggested, I think I like that suggestion. So the squared value is equal to the radius value multiplying itself. So that will give us a square. Remember from the operators lecture, we discussed that. And so if I choose to say that print the value of whatever is squared value, that will only print it to the terminal and I'll not be able to use it anywhere. To throw it up in the computer's memory, I can't find it and use it. But we know that if I want to use anything afterwards, the best thing to do is to declare it in a variable. Fine, we cannot declare a variable in here, like this variable that is in this function. It's not accessible anywhere in our code or everywhere in our code. That is the correct thing I should have said. It's not accessible everywhere in our code. So for instance, if I come here and say print squared value, I see that there's a red line here. Python is telling me that unresolved reference, squared value. So it doesn't know what is squared value, even though the same variable name is here. So because it is inside the function, its scope or it is limited by as long as the function exists. So once we get out of the function and continue our code, we know that we are out of the function because print and def are on the same indentation level. The squared is indented inside the function, so we know that it's nested in the function, so the function's code block. But this print is not the function's code block, it's outside of it. So I'll still be stubborn enough to click on run, and then I will get a name error, which says that squared value is not defined, even though it is inside the function. So that means that as useful as this squared value is, which gives us the square of our radius, we can't call it inside our code, even though we want to call it and use it. So the creator of PyCharm thought of this, and then in all programming languages, we have the return statement. So if you want to return something from the function and make it accessible anywhere in your code, like in the case where you wanted to print the squared value, you just say return followed by what you want to return, which in our case is the squared value. So now if I come back here and then I print again, what gave us the error at first? Still see the red line. So I've returned it, but let me go ahead and run it and see. Still saying that squared value is not defined. That is because that is not how the return statement works. The fact that it is returning squared value doesn't mean that we can literally call this inside our code and expect that we will have the value that is returned in our code. It doesn't work that way. If we want to get the value that is returned in a function, you see, initially I told you that we can call the function, say radius squared, and then the function will do what we want it to do. It's not prompting me to put in the radius value, which I'll pass the radius at the top, because that is what I declared it for. So I have called it now. If I run my code, I'll not get an error. I'll see process finished with exit code 0 as has been displayed. But still, I haven't gotten my value here to use it. If I want it, I have to just assign a variable to this function call. So I can say that, how should I call it? Because I'm using radius squared here. So maybe square of radius. I'm out of options now. I have to assign the function call to variable. So what will happen here when we run the code is that the value that will be returned from this function, which in our case is the squared value, will be assigned to this variable, which is called the square of radius. And so now when we print the square of radius, given that you have passed in a value of 5, because that's the value of this radius function variable up here. When we print it now, we'll see 25 displayed, which is the square of 5. If I change this one to say 2, then when we run the code, we should see 4. So we know that now it is working. So this is how we return a particular value from our function in case we want to use it anywhere. So now I can now go ahead and compute my area, which I will also not do because we are doing functions today. I want to just declare everything in functions, so I can do another function called maybe circle area, my parenthesis, and then in here I will want to take, I'll take two values, which should be pi. So, which again I'll say pi value because I don't want you to think that is the same as the one up there. And then I can accept the radius value also here. And then I come to the next line. I know that area of the circle is equal to the pi times, in this case, it will not be the radius. We can't call it radius value because we will be using the return value of radius squared. So we can, here say square of radius, because that is what we'll be passing in. Okay, so that will be pi times the square of radius. Sorry, pi value times the square of radius. And now you know that if you want to print out this our area to the terminal, we have to return area, just like that. So now we can now say that our area, another variable called our area, now should be equal to circle area, and then we have to pass in the value of pi, which we have declared up there, so I'll just pass that one in. And then because I'm not naming them, I just have to follow the correct order. And then inside here, this is where things get exciting. Functions are reusable blocks of code. Okay, Kent, I'm trying to understand your question, but if you can throw more light on it, I'll be able to answer it then. For now, I don't think I really get the full grasp of what is it you are trying to inquire. So kindly throw more light on it, and I'll surely get to it. Thank you. So inside here, the parameter, the argument of a function can actually be another function in itself. So here we will pass in squared value. Is that how we call it? No, radius squared, sorry. Radius squared. And then we pass in the value that we want to now square, which is also up there as radius. Okay. So I just hope that doesn't confuse you. We are only able, please let me raise a disclaimer here. You are only able to pass it in as an argument, a whole function as an argument, if it has a return value. If it doesn't have a return value, your code will run into an error, most definitely. So make sure that the function that you are using as an argument has a return value. And then that will make it work. Okay. So now I can go ahead and print our area. So print, and let's just decorate it and say the area of the circle is, and then I'll pass in our area. Okay, so now let's run it and see. Looks like our code is doing a lot of things, nesting a lot of things inside, but I don't think anybody should be confused with this. But if you still have some confusion, you want me to clarify, you can drop it in the comments and then it will be answered for you. But if you are watching this stream, not live, but after it has been uploaded, you can drop it in the YouTube comments. I'll come back and answer. Or if you are part of the platform, I think that is the best place to drop it for the whole community to help you out. In the circle area, okay, that is the function. Can I use area equal to pi value times squared value? Okay, I think I do get it now. So the squared value is it's a variable inside the radius squared function. So you can't use the literal name squared value here. So like if I try to use squared value, you can't use it literally here. You see that I have an error. So if I want to use squared value inside my circle area, it should be the returned value of the radius squared function. So since I am returning the squared value, yes, I can rather call radius squared here. Radius squared here. And then pass in the value of the radius, which is up there also as radius. If you want to do it this way, yes, it will work. In that case, we don't need this second parameter. You can do it this way, it will work, but I just wanted to break things down to explain it. Since we are using functions, I just wanted to break things down. And then other than that, I don't think I'll be able to pass in this radius squared here to show you that a function can actually be an argument to another function. Kent, I hope I have explained your question or I've answered it. If I've still not answered it, you can let me know. But I think that is what your question is trying to ask, and that's how I can address it. But if anything, let me also know. I'll give further clarification. Let's go back to how it was. I think we are all good now. Yes. So if we go ahead and then test it mathematically, maybe you can check with a calculator, Windows calculator. Let me see. Calculator. Just to test whether Python is correct. So I have it here. What was the value of pi? The pi is 3.142. So, and our radius was 2. So let's just use the same things there. That would be 3.142 multiplying, and then we can put brackets in there. And then that is 2 squared. So we can see that is 12.568. So let's see whether PyCharm give us 12.568 also. Okay, we see exactly the same value down here. That means that our logic worked also. Okay, so that is it about the introduction to functions. And now you know that this is how we declare a function using the def keyword followed by a function name. And then you can pass in what we call parameters to the function. Use those parameters as variables inside the function. Don't forget that the scope of the parameters is only within the function. As you saw, I tried to access it outside the functions block, and I got an error that it was not defined, even though it was defined inside the function. So just know that those parameters, their scope is within the function. If you want to use anything in the function elsewhere, you have to return it. In fact, we can return more than one item from a function if you have to. So let's just say another equal to some string. If I want to return another also and then use it somewhere, I just have to put a comma here and say another. It will return the two of them. But in that case, it will return them as a list. So when I'm calling the function, I have to specify which of the returned values I want to use. So in our case where we are calling our function here, if we run it, I'm expecting that we jump into an error. Fantastic. It says type error. Can't multiply sequence by non-int type of float. And if that one sounds a little weird to you, just know that I told you that a sequence is just like an array. So it's telling us that it is having an array being multiplied by a float, and that is impossible. So you know that if we try to multiply, if this one was an integer, it will work. As when we're doing the list, you saw that if we multiply a list by an integer, to just duplicate the list for us. So let us run this one and see. Let's just cross our fingers, and then it happened. You saw that it's just returning 4, some string, 4, some string, 4, some string, literally repeating what was returned here 3 times. And that is because we are passing in pi, which have now changed to be 3. And so when pi is 3 and it is multiplying this in here, because we know that that is exactly what the circle area function is doing. It is multiplying the parameters that we pass to it, which is pi value corresponding to pi, and then square of radius corresponding to the output of radius squared. So if we just say that the area of our circle is our area, that part came, and then our area, we know that it's a sequence, a tuple in this case. Sorry, I mentioned that it's a list. It's a tuple. So it is just multiplying what is inside there literally 3 times. So in the case where we are returning more than 1, we can specify what we want to use by the index. So if I put 0 here, what I'm saying is that instead of 4 and string, I'm only interested in the 4, so use the 4. And in that case, it will use the 4 and then give us 12, which is 4 times 3. But if I also say that I want the first one, which is the second item, it will give me some string, which is literally multiplied 3 times. So in case when you want to return many things from a function, it is possible. It is unlimited. You can return like 1,000 items if you want to. So that is it also. So you know also that we can return values from a function and use them. You know that we can call functions inside functions. In this particular version of the screen you are seeing, we don't have a function inside a function, but earlier I showed you that we can call it inside the function itself, inside the function block. You also know that we can pass a function which has a return value. Let me emphasize on that one again, which has a return value inside another function. So it can be the argument of another function also. Okay, so that is a quick recap of what we have done today. As always, if there is any question I have to answer live, I'll give 2 minutes to do that. Other than that, we close the chapter on today and then anticipate for tomorrow. Okay, looks like it's all good. Thank you for today also, especially for understanding that I start the stream 30 minutes late. That break was very, very necessary for me to at least revive myself also. So I'll see you all tomorrow for day 11. And as always, make sure you keep on practicing. Bye-bye.